Welcome to part two, the journey of your game. This is going to be
Back
good.
with fresh coffee.
Yeah, we got a coffee. Darcy's got a little tea. It's cute.
No, I went with coffee.
Did
coffee.
you? Oh, you actually went with coffee.
Yeah, I lied. I lied straight to your face.
Was that a bit of instant? Bit of black instant?
That's it. Well, I figured coffee's more of a journey thing, you know?
Let's just put a bit of rocket fuel into the lad. See what happens.
That's it.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun. Part two. It's going to be essentially some observations we've made about or seen with people, how they journey through the game itself and what analogies and metaphors we can take from that to apply to business life, how you actually journey through life.
Nice.
It's going to be really practical. I think it's going to be strategic. Das, I'd love all your insights around the psychological aspects or the human behavior type of aspects as well. Let's see where this goes, shall we? Shall we dig in?
We shall dig in.
For the viewers of the Content Hub, make sure you go get your rocket fuel. This one's going to be one to really dig into. So the first part was this triangle approach that we've kind of seen that people either consciously or subconsciously use to win chips and allow themselves to make progress throughout the game. This is probably going to be a really awesome piece of content for people to consume, because I think this will actually set you up for your next game, but obviously will set you up in your business as well. And really what we've come up with here, Das, is that we've seen that people work through three key areas and all of them are linked in a way. And that is position, the movement, and then their approach. And so
very, very warfare based, this one. This is like they're in the tank and this is how the tank is moving forward.
Yeah, totally true.
You know,
it's an interesting thing to think about. And I've consciously, since just observing the game, have really thought about this in a quite a bit of detail. It's definitely helped me in the business as well. So shall we dive in, Das?
We shall. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So let's start with position. And so position is essentially being aware of where you're actually, strangely enough, positioned in a location point of view, but also space in a room. And so what we've observed by people playing, say, the chips game, for example, is they'll either choose to position themselves in the outer circle, meaning they'll move themselves in a positioning point of view to the far corners, sometimes even out of the room as a whole. Some will position themselves smack bang in the middle, but in smaller groups. Others will literally stand on a chair and make announcements. And these are all different. These are all different areas of positioning, and they all have their pros and their cons. So, what's your take on that? Where people choose to position themselves, and let's say the room is hypothetically the marketplace, right?
Of course. Yeah. I was going to say the metaphor for how this applies to life should be screaming at anyone listening to this at the moment, which is wherever you choose to position yourself in a room largely will impact or reflect how you're positioning yourself in the outside world. Excuse me. So I'm drinking my rocket fuel too quick, obviously. So, so when it comes to position, let's just run through some examples of how this works. So when you walk into a room, do you position yourself as someone at the center of the room that you want everyone to be looking at? That has its pros and cons. Do you position yourself on the outside of the room and sort of observe everyone more on the inside? That has its pros and cons. Do you position yourself outside of the room? That has its pros and cons. People are like, oh, if you're outside the room, you can't have any influence inside the room. It's like, yeah, true. That may be the case, but that also makes you the link to connecting that room with another room outside that room. Like you're the link that sits in the middle of the two. So everything, no matter where you position yourself, it has its pros and cons, right? There's also the position that we look at when we are speaking sort of inside the room. You look at things from a position as a social hierarchy. So do you position yourself as a bottom dweller that aims to leverage the skills of the people at the top? I.e., do you make a really good employee? Okay, and when I say bottom dweller, please don't hear there's no venom in that. That's just when it comes to the leverage scale, you're dwelling down the bottom. Like this is where you're choosing to stay. Again, has its pros and cons. You get paid by someone else. You can leave your work at work. You don't have to go home and take responsibility for it and think about it in bed at night. It all has its pros and cons. Do you position yourself at the top of the social hierarchy? So you choose to take responsibility for the entire room, for everything going on. Yes, you bear the burden of responsibility, but typically, your salary is quite a bit higher than the people that choose not to do that. Do you position yourself in the bottom? In the bottom. Do you position yourself in the middle? So like you take almost like a managerial role or a mid-level leader role. So that way you can play the game from leveraging the people at the top, but also having some form of authority and movement and influence and delegation over the people that are dwelling down the bottom. Does this make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So position itself, man, that word position, we could talk about just that for days, because no matter what you're doing, you are, number one, you're in a position, and number two, you're wanting to probably move to a different position. And number three, you've also had a position in your past that you've come from to get where you are. So that's the position on a timeline basis.
Yeah.
Position and knowing where you are, I would suggest, as I say this now, I realize that position probably reverts perfectly back to the first principle of success that we discussed, which is self-awareness.
I was going to say that.
Are you aware of your position in any room or social setting?
100%.
I love this idea. If you're playing poker and you haven't figured out who the sucker is at the table within the first 30 minutes, you're the sucker. And the thing is that if you don't know your position at the table, if you don't know where you sit and where you stand, then chances are everyone else knows where you do, and it's probably not the best position.
100%. Two extra things that I'm really loving around this word position. I think it's a deep word the more that we think about it. There's also a position locationally, I think, is a really powerful thing. Having the
you mean like geographically?
Geographic location, geographic positioning. I think that's a massive thing to be aware of in your business game, is what locations do you really want to spend most of your time focusing in? For example, you might be in a really noisy position. And just by going a little bit deeper into, say, maybe like a sub-industry or a sub-niche or a sub-location can pay huge dividends in your business. I'll give you an example of this. When I first started back in the consulting game, I made a deliberate decision to work in rural areas. So places that were hard for people to get to. Darcy loves the word rural.
I hate that word, rural.
It's such a hard word to say too. I made a conscious decision to travel to places and work in locations that other people would just find frustrating to get to. And that really was a way to leverage and jump my own position in business, so to speak, financially, and just having the awareness of this can make a tremendous difference. Another thing I always like to think about is the opposite effect. And essentially, you can position yourself either online or offline in certain ways as well. So if everyone's being, early adopters, innovators in the area of technology and video and personalized video and all this digital stuff that's quite noisy at the moment, you can consciously position yourself on the opposite end of that spectrum and start writing handwritten letters in the mail or personalized video direct to market. Position is such a powerful thing to be aware of. And I'd have a prediction and a suggestion that people aren't aware of their position nowhere near enough. And in the chips game, I think one way that you can really win is even be aware of where your position is, similar to poker, with how many chips you have, how many chips other people have, and where do you fit on that spectrum. If you've got heaps and heaps of chips in your pocket, you might be able to play from a position of strength, and more so towards the people that have no chips.
Yes.
They're in a position where they want to get back in the game,
You can use your position largely to your advantage there.
Totally. Or you could say, let's say you're down in your chips and you don't have much money, but you have work ethic. You might be able to use that as a position of strength to say, I've got not much to lose, so I can go all in. I'm already out of the game, so I'm going to triple down on this and move forward in the game. Everything has its pros. Everything has its cons. The game here is to be aware of all of those factors and leverage the pros more than the cons.
Nice.
That's the game.
That's great, man. A lot of people as well will say, I don't know what position I'm in. I don't know how to define my position in the market. I don't know how to define my position in this networking event. I don't know. Defining position can be difficult, but we come back to what you said before around actually like killing off options. A lot of people may not know where they currently are, but they definitely know where they're not.
Mm-hmm. Or where they don't want to be.
Or where they don't want to be. So if that's anything you're struggling with, you're like, okay, so what is my position? I don't know how to define that. Flip it over and go, okay, well, where do I definitely know I'm not? I know I'm not at the top. I can sense that. I really do know that. But I kind of also know I'm not at the bottom. That's for sure. Well, chances are you're somewhere in the middle. So it's just about figuring that out. Mm-hmm. So position is key. Next one.
Movement. Movement's a really, really powerful thing as well. Essentially, once you're aware of your position on all ends of the spectrum, geography, financial, social hierarchy, like there's so many different playing fields. And once you've got a good awareness of that, the pros and the cons, and you're starting to leverage the pros more than the cons, the movement then becomes, what do you do with that? And essentially, how do you move through that play? And so I think the key part with movement, the people that win games are the ones that are deliberate in everything they say and do. Everything. Deliberate in every single word, every single action, every single positional movement. It's when you get rid of and kill off the winging it strategy, unless you're deliberately playing the winging it strategy.
Okay? I love that.
That's fine, as long as it's being consciously being deliberate. And so some examples of movement would be, okay, I know that I'm in this geography. It's not where I want to be. So I'm going to deliberately move my attention and focus and conversations and marketing material and language and whatever else it may be. I'm going to move it to the position on the table that I want to get to. Example of this is, I'm in a really noisy marketplace. I can't cut through. I'm definitely not at the top. I'm definitely not at the bottom, but I'm in the noisiest middle ever. I want to get to the top. That's my deliberate positional move. I want to be at the top of my game. I can't do it in my current geographical location. You deliberately move.
Yes.
To a different pond, a different place, a different location. So then you can strategically position yourself at the top for no other reason that there's less players there. Or you know that you can play from a position of strength. Maybe it could be finances. Maybe it could be resources. Maybe it's because you're the only person with social hierarchy in that particular area. There's no other people with social hierarchy there. It's deliberate. You don't just pick up your house and move to a random spot and get there and like, why am I living here? Okay, there has to be deliberate thought, strategic thought. That's the game of movement. People in the game that just wander around and float around and like, oh, maybe I'll talk to that person. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, I'm going to float over here. No, it didn't work. Oh, I just somehow lost 3 chips for no reason. I don't know what happened. That's because you're winging it. There was no you weren't strategic and deliberate in anything you do.
Love it, man. Another way we can see movement, again, is across time. So many people, if you're aware of your movement, you'll also be aware whether it's fast or slow. Again, both have their pros and cons. I used to play a lot of Age of Empires, which is a computer game.
The best game ever.
It was the best. Age of Empires 2 specifically was the best. Is that like, agreed? Or like,
Oh no, I agreed. Like,
thank you. 100%. I was about to turn down the.
Mate,
I was about to walk away.
Remember when Nutri-Grain was just throwing those
Did you just give you the game of Age of Empires? It was great.
They just knew that like actually playing Age of Empires 2 was better than eating. So might as well just keep it
pure market approach. So movement can be. There used to be these Jaguar warriors that you would get as the Aztecs. And the Aztecs were like this rapid moving little organization where they'd walk almost like termites, just take over a bit of wood and then keep moving. Like you see it in like stop motion really fast, you know?
Yeah.
Or you could go the Persians, and their special thing was the elephants. The elephants would take like 10 minutes to walk from one side of the map to the other. But when they got there, they dominated. Like there was no stopping the elephants. They were slow and steady, but they knew exactly where they were going, and they were extremely hard to take down. Aztec warriors, super quick, super rapid, but you could kill them really quick as well. This makes sense. So understanding your pace of movement as well is really important. One of my mentors, he often talks about this. He's a big inspiration of mine. He often talks about, he's like, I work around a lot of people that want to move really quick, and we create a lot, we innovate a lot, and I surround myself with a lot of those people. But he's like, but me, I'm just like one of those, big yacht sail ships where it's just slowly moving on the water at like a centimeter an hour, but it knows exactly where it's going and it's fine.
Yeah.
And so, and the scale, again, pros and cons everywhere, just self-awareness of what your movement is the key.
And if you haven't got it yet, everything has pros and cons. There is nothing that is just a con. There is nothing that is just a pro plus. The game here, guys, the game is leveraging the pros over the cons. That's the game. It's being conscious. So yeah, movement's a really big one. And sometimes different situations call for different things, right? Sometimes a quick move right at the end of the game could win it.
Yes.
Maybe a quick move off the start, but then you slow down could win it. Again, don't wing it, be deliberate. Whatever you do, you need to back yourself, which probably ties into the third principle is once you know yourself and you know your pros and cons, is then back whatever decision you make on that one.
Nice.
And then the third one is approach. And approach is essentially the engagement point. Okay. So position is kind of, as you've sensed, is pretty broad. It's pretty wide. There's lots of different planes and spectrums you can place yourself on position. You start to work out the pros and cons of it there. You begin leverage at that point. Movement then is how you navigate through them based on where you want to adjust your position, either fast or slow, etc. The approaches are the point of engagement. If we go back to the Age of Empires thing, it's like the moment the elephant starts to go hit something.
Yes.
And there's different approaches. Like you could go top down, you could go bottom up, you could come in from the side. There's
you could go online, you could go offline. Yes.
There's so many different approaches here. And the main thing you want to keep in mind here, and this comes down to a little bit of principle number 2, which is knowing others, is to understand what would give you the best shot at making a positive first impression. What would align to the market? What would align to the player in the most positive way possible? That's when you become deliberate in your approach. And part of that is actually observation and listening first, kind of like we talked about in previous videos. If you're sitting in the room, sales game room, and you observe someone and they're playing the position of outside looking in, no movement, sitting and observing, probably an approach of like running towards them, like, hey, let's do something together, probably won't align to the way that they're seeing the game.
Mm-hmm.
You might better off pulling up a chair and just sitting beside them for a while and going, pretty interesting, huh? And then just sit there together. That might be a better approach. And so it's about not only being aware of your own position and movement, but then being aware of other people's position and movement, and then aligning yourself from a place of approach.
Nice. That has to just simply come from observation, doesn't it? And trial and error. I think approach is the one that will be most impacted by trial and error.
Yeah, for sure.
Approach is the one that would change the quickest given the context of any situation, or so approach is the one that would change the quickest given the context of any situation, because you need to adapt in any different type of environment depending on who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And that's super important to keep in mind with approach. Is your approach, there may be some similarities in every time you approach something or someone, but chances are next time you do approach them, it's going to be different. Every time you play a golf shot, there's a different wind you got to deal with.
Yeah, that's right. And having the ability to iterate quickly is definitely a practical skill.
Nice.
That you can learn. And practical evidence of this is how quickly can you get back on track when things don't go to plan. Mm. And it's as simple as like, oh, I'm going to go to dinner at this place. And you walk to the front door and it's closed. How quickly can you be like, okay, cool, that's sweet, let's go here instead, as opposed to, oh no, my whole plan's been thrown out of it. What are we going to do now? And you spend 45 minutes negotiating with your friends on where to eat next.
Yes.
This is a massive part of the approach, is like how quickly can you iterate and how quickly can you get on with it with a positive mindset when curveballs get thrown in.
Nice.
And you'll notice the sales game is full of curveballs. So
questions, thoughts, comments, curveballs down below.
Love it.